always believed that life had a strange way of balancing things. Moments of joy balanced by moments of heartbreak, wins balanced by losses, and hopes balanced by disappointments. But nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for the way my own destiny unraveled. One moment, I was standing in a mahogany, paneled office, trying to process the words coming out of my lawyer's mouth. The next, I was lying in a hospital bed, broken, bleeding, and abandoned by the one person I once thought loved me. But let me take you back to the beginning of the day everything changed. It started with a letter, not an email, not a phone call. A real white embossed envelope slipped through my door early in the morning. It looked official, too official for me, a woman whose life had been defined by routine, bills, small victories, and even smaller joys. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a simple line: "You are requested at the office of Attorney Michael Whitmore at 10:00 a.m. regarding a confidential matter." I didn't know anyone named Whitmore. I didn't have lawsuits pending. I wasn't expecting any miracles, but life has a habit of delivering the unexpected. I arrived at his office with my heart beating like a drum. Attorney Whitmore was an older man with silver hair and a calm, reassuring presence. He gestured for me to sit. "Ms. Claire," he said, folding his hands neatly, "I'm sure you're wondering why you're here." I nodded. My throat felt dry. He opened a folder, slid a stack of papers toward me, and spoke the words that froze me completely. "Your Aunt Margaret Kensington has left her entire estate to you. As of this morning, you have inherited $36 million. $36 million. The number didn't feel real. It felt like something out of a dream I would be too scared to tell anyone. My Aunt Margaret, the woman who had taken care of me when my parents died, the woman who sent handwritten letters every holiday, the woman my husband, Daniel, always dismissed as that weird old lady. I hadn't seen her in years. And yet, she left everything to me." I covered my mouth. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't cry because of the money. I cried because she still cared, even from beyond the grave. I stepped out of the office with documents, bank details, transfer approvals. The beginning of a new life in a neat folder clutched to my chest. The sun felt warmer. The street felt friendlier, and all I could think was, I need to tell Daniel. He had always been obsessed with money. He talked about wealth more than happiness. He talked about success more than love. I always thought it was harmless, maybe insecurity, but I truly believed, this news would lift him, heal him. Make him finally see the good in life again. I rushed to my car, smiling like a fool. I didn't even buckle my seatbelt properly. I just wanted to go home, but miracles often walk hand in hand with tragedy. I was halfway down the highway when I heard screeching. A truck skidded across lanes. The world spun, metal bent, glass shattered, and then darkness. When I woke, everything was white sheets. White walls, white lights burning my eyes. My body felt heavy, numb, distant. I tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. What? What happened? A nurse approached, her expression gentle. "Ma'am, you were in a severe accident, but you're safe. You're very lucky to be alive." Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt crushed. By pain, by fear, by loneliness. Then I remembered Daniel, my husband, my partner, my only family. Did my husband come? I asked with a shaky voice. The nurse's expression softened with pity in her eyes. "No, dear, no one has visited you. No one, not even once." Something inside me cracked. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he was out, maybe no. He always had his phone, always kept track of everything. I asked for my cell phone. My hands trembled as I dialed. He picked up on the third ring. His voice sounded irritated, as if I were interrupting something important. "Daniel." "It's me," I whispered. "I've been in an accident. I'm hurt." "Why haven't you?" He exhaled sharply, cutting me off. "Look, Claire, I don't have time for this. I'm busy, and I don't have the money or patience to deal with hospital drama. You always find ways to make things complicated." My breath caught. I waited for him to apologize, to ask if I was okay, to show a hint of care. But instead he said the words that stabbed deeper than any injury. "I'm done taking care of a loser. Don't call me again." A loser after everything, after loving him. After supporting him, after carrying him through every struggle. The man I built my life with discarded me in seconds. I stared at the silent phone. A part of me broke forever. The next days blurred into each other. Nurses walking in and out, machines beeping, the slow drip of painkillers, doctors checking my wounds. But the deeper wound, emotional, invisible, kept bleeding. On the fourth day, the doctor told me I would recover but needed rest. I nodded numbly. Then the footsteps came. Two voices approached from the hallway. A man's voice and a woman's. They were laughing. Loud, carefree, almost mocking. I recognized the man instantly. Daniel. My pulse spiked, my breath shortened, but the woman with him, her heels clicked sharply. Her perfume arrived before she did. Expensive, bold, a total contrast to the hospital smell. She walked in before him. Young, beautiful, sparkling jewelry, designer clothes, flawless makeup. She looked like everything I wasn't. Daniel stepped in behind her, smirking. "Well," he said, folding his arms, "look at this pathetic sight." His voice was dripping with satisfaction. The woman stifled a laugh. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my body. "Daniel, who is she?" He shrugged casually. "This is Vanessa, my wife." My world shattered again. Wife? I whispered. "You, remarried." He grinned cruelly. "You were as good as dead. Why should I waste my life waiting for someone who can't keep up?" Vanessa stepped forward, smirking. "So this is her, the sad little burden you always talked about." My throat tightened. I felt small, invisible, worthless. Daniel leaned on the end of my bed. "You know, Vanessa and I just came to get some closure. And honestly," he gestured at me, "you're doing me a favor looking like this." Their laughter echoed like knives. But then everything changed in an instant. Vanessa walked closer, her arrogant smile still plastered on her face, until her eyes landed on the medical chart clipped at the foot of my bed. Suddenly, her expression froze. Her mouth opened, her face went pale, ghostly pale. She staggered back a step, then out of nowhere she screamed, a loud, piercing scream that made Daniel jump. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes stayed glued to the chart. She looked horrified. "Daniel," she choked, pointing with a trembling finger. "Do you see that? Do you know who she is now?" And in that moment, everything in the room shifted. Vanessa's scream echoed through the sterile hospital room, bouncing off the walls with a sharpness that made the nurse outside rush to the door. But Vanessa didn't stop. Her perfectly manicured hand shook violently as she pointed at the chart clipped to the end of my bed. The chart I hadn't even bothered to look at since waking up. Her voice trembled. Her posture crumbled. Her confidence collapsed into a shivering mess of panic and realization. "Daniel?" She gasped again, words barely forming. "Did you know who she is? Did you know what she's worth?" Daniel's amusement slowly faded. His smirk slipped. He stepped forward, annoyed at first, but when he leaned close enough to read the small printed line on the chart, his jaw dropped, his eyebrows shot up, his face lost color. Written in clean, neat handwriting were the words, "Next of kin, Attorney Michael Whitmore, financial status. Hi, Val, you inheritance beneficiary estate total, $36,000,000. Everything froze. I watched Daniel's expression shift slowly, from confusion to disbelief to a terrible realization that twisted his face into something ugly and desperate. 36 million, he murmured. His voice cracked. He looked at me like he had never seen me in his life, not as his wife, not as a burden, not as someone he mocked and abandoned, but as a treasure, a jackpot, a fortune. "Claire," he whispered, the cruelty evaporating from his voice like smoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" I stared at him with an emptiness I didn't know I had. Why would I tell a man who left me to die? Why would I share anything with someone who called me a loser? But I didn't say a word. It was Vanessa who broke the silence again. Only this time her scream had morphed into anger. "You idiot," she shrieked at Daniel. "You told me she was poor. You told me she had nothing. We married because you promised me we'd build a life together, not because I wanted to be tied to some broke, boring widow. To be." She shoved him hard. Hard enough that he stumbled into the little table holding my water cup. "And you left her," she continued, hysterical. "You divorced a woman worth $36 million. Are you insane?" Daniel's face twisted. Embarrassment, regret, greed, panic, all those emotions fought for control as he turned back to me with wide, pleading eyes. "Claire, honey," he started softly, stepping toward my bed. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't mean what I said earlier. I was stressed. I was confused." "Confused," I whispered, cutting him off for the first time. My voice was calm, too calm. "You told me I was a loser." He froze. Vanessa shot him a look of disgust. His voice dropped to a frantic, desperate tone. "I didn't mean it. You know I say stupid things. We've always had our ups and downs, but, Claire, we can fix this. We can start over. We can I repeated softly. He smiled nervously. "Of course, baby. We're husband and wife." The laugh that came out of me was weak, painful, but real, not joyful, not kind, just tired. "Daniel," I whispered, "you were married." He blinked rapidly. That was a mistake. "I didn't know you were alive, and I thought." He reached for my hand. I pulled it away, the smallest motion, but it hit him like a slap. Vanessa crossed her arms, overcome by a bitter mix of rage and panic. "So what now?" she demanded. You're going to run back to your first wife and leave me. After you convinced me to marry you because she was dead weight. This was supposed to be our life." Daniel ignored her completely. Instead, he leaned closer to me to close. His voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Claire, I love you, you know that, right?" For the first time in days, I truly looked at him. At the lines around his mouth formed from years of sneering, at the emptiness in his eyes, at the greed in the way he stared at me, not at my bruises, not at my injuries, but at what he thought he could still take. I felt nothing for him, not love, not hate, nothing at all. "Daniel," I whispered, "you didn't come for 4 days. His lips parted as if to argue. I continued, "You didn't call. You didn't ask if I was alive. You abandoned me when I needed you most." And then I dropped the words that shattered him completely. "Please leave, both of you." Daniel's eyes widened. He looked truly stunned, like he couldn't comprehend it. "Claire, you don't mean that. You're emotional. We need to talk." The nurse stepped into the doorway, hearing the commotion. "Sir, ma'am," she said firmly, "the patient needs rest. You need to leave." Daniel whirled on her angrily. "This is my wife." "I have a right to be here." "No," Vanessa snapped. "You said I'm your wife." The nurse frowned at both of them. "Hospital rules." She said moments later, "If the patient asks visitors to leave, they must leave." Immediately, I closed my eyes and whispered the words again. "I want them gone." A silence fell, a thick, suffocating one. Daniel's breath grew ragged. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't sad. He wasn't even ashamed. He was scared. "Claire, please, let's talk. Let's work this out." "I made mistakes, but we can fix it. Get out," I said quietly. Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Let's go." She hissed, but he jerked away from her, still staring at me, still trying to comprehend the fact that for the first time in my life, I wasn't bending, I wasn't apologizing, I wasn't explaining. I was choosing myself. As the nurse began guiding them out, Daniel turned one last time. His voice cracked. "Claire, don't do this." "Please." I said nothing, and for the first time, he realized nothing he could say would ever reach me again. The door closed behind them, the room fell quiet, and for the first time since waking up in that hospital, I exhaled. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the beginning. The following week moved slowly. My body healed little by little. I regained strength. Nurses became friends. Doctors encouraged me. The hospital food didn't get any better, but my heart started settling into a strange calmness. I didn't tell anyone about the money, not yet. I kept it tucked away like a secret seed waiting to bloom in the right soil. But Daniel didn't go away. On the 6th day, I heard the familiar voice of the front desk nurse whispering in frustration. "Sir, she doesn't want to see you. Please stop coming here." He came every day, morning and evening, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with gifts, sometimes with tears. But I refused every attempt, every request, every call. He had abandoned me once. I intended to make that abandonment permanent, but fate had more surprises in store. On the 7th day, the day I was supposed to be discharged, 2 unexpected people walked into my room. Attorney Michael Whitmore and his assistant. My heart skipped. "Ms. Claire," he said warmly, "we have some matters to finalize before your discharge. Would you be comfortable talking now?" I nodded. He placed a sealed envelope in my hand. "This," he continued, "is your aunt's final letter. She instructed us to give it to you when you were physically recovered enough to read it." My fingers trembled. A letter from Aunt Margaret, her last words, her last gift. I swallowed hard, and Whitmore added, "We need to discuss your estate, your options, and the legal situation regarding estranged husband, as well as your inheritance protection." I looked up sharply. "Husband?" I asked with a cold edge. Whitmore smiled gently. "Ex-husband," he clarified. "He signed the divorce papers during your hospitalization." My breath caught. "He filed for divorce." Whitmore nodded. "Yes, but don't worry. It was processed quickly, and ironically, his timing ensured he has no legal claim to your inheritance whatsoever." I almost laughed. After everything he tried to gain, after the greed, the cruelty, the abandonment, he had legally severed any right to even a penny. Life has a dark sense of humor. Whitmore continued, "I also want to warn you, he has been trying to contact our office repeatedly since he discovered the inheritance. But legally, he has no standing." I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power, control, choice, but there was still more to confront, more to unravel, more to rebuild, and more truth to uncover. Because there was something in Aunt Margaret's letter, something I hadn't read yet, that would change everything all over again. I looked down at the sealed envelope. My aunt's handwriting stared back at me softly. for Claire. Read this when your heart is ready. And with that, I took a deep breath and opened it. The envelope trembled in my hands. The paper inside smelled faintly of lavender and old books, Aunt Margaret's signature scent. I unfolded it carefully, as if the words themselves were fragile, ready to crumble under my touch. The letter began. My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, it means you have survived the darkest days. You are stronger than you know. I want to tell you things that your heart may not yet be ready to hear, but they must be said. I paused, my eyes scanning the familiar flowing script. Her words were always precise, careful, yet infused with warmth. I read on. First, your inheritance is more than money. It is freedom, freedom to choose who you allow in your life, who you trust and who you let go. Keep your heart guarded, my dear, for some people will never appreciate what you have until it is too late. A small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. She had known. She had always known Daniel would betray me. Second, your husband, the letter continued, has proven his true nature. There are those who will abandon you in your weakest moments. Remember that. They do not deserve your love, your energy, or your time. Let them leave and do not look back. Some lessons are harsh, but they teach us what we are truly worth. My hands clenched the paper. Every word was a dagger and a shield, every line a reminder of the strength I had overlooked in myself. Then the final part of the letter made my breath catch. Lastly, my darling Claire, I have prepared for you more than money. You have connections, influence, and resources that can ensure your future is secure. Use them wisely, and if the time comes for justice, for retribution, remember that patience and precision are far more powerful than anger. Your life is just beginning, and the world is waiting for the woman you are destined to become. I folded the letter slowly, savoring the weight of it. Aunt Margaret had always believed in me, always, even when I had doubted myself. It was a turning point. The scales had finally shifted. I realized I didn't need Daniel. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his love. I didn't need Vanessa. I had everything I needed within myself, and more. 6 million reasons to take control of my life, my destiny, and my dignity. The next morning, I was discharged from the hospital. My car was waiting outside, rented under a temporary name. I didn't want Daniel or Vanessa to know where I was. I returned home to an apartment that had seemed small and confining before, but now felt like neutral ground. My first act was to secure my inheritance. Whitmore's office guided me through the legal intricacies, accounts under my name only, assets diversified, properties transferred, and a trust established so that no one could ever touch my fortune without my explicit consent. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. Bandages were gone, but scars remained, not just physical. Emotional, I touched the faint line across my temple, the bruise fading on my wrist. I breathed deeply. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The next step was more delicate. Daniel would not let go. Vanessa would not back down. They were greedy, entitled, and reckless. And if I was to reclaim my life fully, I needed a plan. I began quietly at first. Small investigations, discreet inquiries. I discovered that Daniel had spent recklessly in the years we had been married. Loans, credit lines, extravagant purchases, all tied to his name. Vanessa was young and ambitious, but naive. And she trusted Daniel's lies. That meant they were vulnerable. I reached out to a private investigator, a competent, discreet professional. I instructed him to gather detailed information on their habits, finances, and connections. Every dinner, every shopping spree, every luxury purchase. Documented, then I allowed myself one indulgence. I shopped for myself, not cheap clothes, not necessities, luxury, quality. Everything that Daniel had ever mocked me for wanting, I now acquired without hesitation. Silk scarves, elegant dresses, jewelry that sparkled in the soft light. It was small, personal, and deeply satisfying. Days turned into weeks. Each visit from the investigator added layers to my understanding. I learned that Daniel had moved in with Vanessa in a lavish apartment on the other side of the city. He had no plans to return to me, not that he deserved to, but he had underestimated one thing, me. I began to imagine the confrontation, not out of anger, but out of justice. The kind of justice Aunt Margaret had alluded to. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to beg. I wanted precision. I wanted them to see the truth, to feel the weight of their mistakes. First opportunity came sooner than I expected. A charity gala, high profile, filled with media and socialites. Daniel and Vanessa were invited. They had flaunted their new wealth, unaware that I now eclipsed them in every possible way. I arrived that evening in a dress that shimmered like the night sky, my presence commanding attention without a single word. I didn't need to confront them immediately. I let the room notice me first. The whispers started, "Is that Claire?" I heard she inherited a fortune. She's radiant. When they saw me, Daniel's face went pale. Vanessa froze, clutching her glass as if it were a lifeline. The smugness was gone, replaced by fear. I moved gracefully toward the center of the hall, a warm smile curling across my lips, not cruel. Not angry, just serene, calm, powerful, and then, in front of the entire gala, I made my move. "Daniel," I said, my voice carrying across the room, "Vanessa. So lovely to see you both tonight." Vanessa gasped and Daniel stuttered. He tried to reach for me to pull me aside, but I ignored him. "You see," I continued, letting a soft chuckle escape, "I've been fortunate. Very fortunate. And sometimes life teaches us lessons in the most unusual ways." Heads turned, cameras clicked, whispers grew. "I've inherited something remarkable," I said, letting my hand gesture toward my wrist, where a delicate bracelet glimmered. "But more importantly, I've learned who truly deserves my trust and who does not." Daniel opened his mouth, but I raised a finger. "Silence, you see, greed has consequences," I said, "and abandoning someone who needed you most, that has consequences too." Vanessa's eyes widened. She had no idea I had discovered everything about their finances, their plans, and their lies. "I've secured my fortune, my independence, and my future," I said softly, "and now I get to enjoy it. Without people who never truly cared about me." The room erupted in polite applause. The sting of humiliation washed over Daniel and Vanessa in waves. Their carefully constructed facade crumbled. The whispers grew louder. The truth of their recklessness was out in public view. For the first time, I felt the exhilarating power of justice. I had not shouted, I had not screamed, I had not begged. I had simply been present, and that was enough. But even as the gala ended and I drove home in silence, I knew this was only the beginning. The inheritance was substantial, yes, but more valuable than money was the knowledge that I had agency, that I could shape my life, that I could take control of the narrative that had been written for me and rewrite it in my favor. And with that thought, I smiled. Aunt Margaret had been right. Patience, precision, and self-belief were far more powerful than anger. The days following the gala were intoxicating. For the first time in years, I felt the sweet, rare taste of control. Daniel avoided me, hiding behind his arrogance, his shame, and Vanessa's trembling support. I let them stew. I watched from a distance as they navigated their fragile world, both unsure how to act, both terrified that I might dismantle the comfortable life they thought they had built. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. Aunt Margaret's letter had whispered a promise. If the time comes for justice, remember that patience and precision are far more powerful than anger. I had exercised patience, now it was time for precision. I spent the following weeks meticulously planning, not out of malice but necessity. Daniel and Vanessa were reckless. They flaunted wealth they did not earn. They made careless decisions, and I was ready to make sure those decisions caught up with them, without them realizing it until the consequences were unavoidable. I hired a financial advisor I trusted implicitly, a woman who had handled the estates of the ultra-wealthy and knew exactly how to create contracts, agreements, and investments that could protect me and simultaneously corner someone like Daniel. Together, we began crafting a plan that would not just secure my fortune, but also ensure that Daniel and Vanessa could not touch a single penny. We set up legal protections, shell accounts, trusts, and corporate entities. Each step was precise, deliberate, and invisible to the untrained eye. Meanwhile, Daniel tried everything. He called, texted, and even sent flowers to my apartment. Vanessa followed him faithfully, hoping to charm or intimidate me, but I was untouchable. My heart no longer wavered. My mind was focused, and my patience infinite. The perfect opportunity presented itself 2 months later. Daniel had invested in a startup company that had initially promised high returns, but was now teetering on collapse. Vanessa, naive and inexperienced, had poured a significant portion of their joint savings into it. The apartment was lavish, yes, but their finances were fragile. I acted subtly. Using my new financial network, I acquired detailed information about the company's dealings, mismanaged funds, pending lawsuits, and regulatory violations. I didn't touch it myself. I simply waited. I let their ignorance and greed do the work for me. The day came when the news broke. Headlines screamed, "Tech startup collapse. Investors lose millions overnight." And who were the biggest victims? Daniel and Vanessa. I didn't gloat. I watched silently as panic set in. Calls were ignored, arguments erupted, and Vanessa's perfect composure crumbled entirely. Daniel's ego, which had carried him through life like armor, shattered piece by piece. I allowed myself a private smile, not cruelty, satisfaction. The satisfaction of seeing karma delivered, not by chance, but by design. But my revenge wasn't just financial, it was personal. I invited them to what I called a reconciliation dinner, a neutral venue I knew they would be desperate to attend. Vanessa, hopeful yet suspicious, agreed immediately. Daniel, eager to reclaim some semblance of control, followed her. When they arrived, they found the table elegantly set, dim lighting, and a sense of calm authority in the room. I greeted them warmly, though my smile was measured. "I'm glad you both could come," I said. "I think it's time we talked about." Closure. Daniel's eyes darted nervously around the room. Vanessa fidgeted with her clutch. I poured myself a glass of wine and offered them each one. They took it, hesitation etched on their faces. "I've been thinking a lot about the past." I continued, "about trust, about loyalty, about what it means to abandon someone in their most vulnerable moments." Vanessa gasped. Daniel opened his mouth to interrupt. I raised a finger. "Silence, you see." I said softly, "Some lessons are learned the hard way. Some people have to experience the consequences of their choices before they understand their impact." I slid an envelope across the table toward them. "Everything you need to know is inside. Consider it." A gift. Daniel picked it up, curiosity mixed with greed. He opened it carefully. Inside were printed financial statements, legal notices, and an accounting of their losses. Every misstep, every investment gone wrong, every liability they had incurred, it was all documented. Vanessa screamed, not a shriek of surprise, but a sound of sheer helpless terror. Daniel's face turned white. His hands shook. He looked at me, searching for mercy. "There was none. I warned you," I said, "and yet you ignored it. You abandoned me when I needed you most. You thought you could rebuild your life while trampling over mine." They stared at me in disbelief. The smug arrogance they had carried into the gala, into our lives, was gone. They were exposed. "You will not touch a single cent of my fortune." I continued. "You have nothing to claim, nothing to demand, nothing to take. And your reputation. Well, let's just say the world knows the truth now." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, Daniel's jaw clenched, but there was no anger, only recognition of the trap they had walked into. I stood up, calm and composed. "I hope this teaches you the lesson Aunt Margaret always knew. Some people are meant to be anchors in your life, holding you down. And some are meant to be lessons, showing you exactly what not to tolerate." I walked to the door and paused. "Goodbye." They were left in stunned silence, the gravity of their failures sinking in. Their cries for sympathy were met with silence. Their attempts at excuses fell flat, and as I stepped out into the night, feeling the cool breeze on my face, I realized this was more than revenge. This was liberation. For the first time in years, I was free. Free from manipulation, free from betrayal, free from anyone who doubted my worth. And with $36 million, a network of allies, and a mind sharpened by betrayal and recovery, I was unstoppable. But I also knew this: true power was not just about revenge. It was about building a life so strong, so independent, that no one, no matter how selfish or reckless, could ever take it away, and that was exactly what I intended to do. The days after the reconciliation dinner were electric. I could feel the tremors of their panic ripple through the social circles we shared. Gossip traveled fast, and Daniel and Vanessa were now the center of every whispered conversation. But I didn't need to be present for them to feel the consequences. Every phone call unanswered, every business opportunity lost, every acquaintance who had once praised them now looked at them with wary eyes. This was their world collapsing. Yet I had not finished. Revenge, if it was to be satisfying, had to be absolute. It had to teach them that abandoning someone in their darkest hour would never go unpunished. I began to use my inheritance strategically. Real estate, investments, philanthropic projects, every move visible to the public, carefully chosen to highlight my success while exposing their failures. I made appearances at high-profile charity events, press conferences, and galas. The media loved the story: abandoned wife inherits millions and triumphs over greedy husband. Each headline, each social media post echoed the message they desperately tried to ignore. They had lost. One afternoon, a surprise arrived. A letter, hand-delivered, addressed to me. The handwriting was unfamiliar but elegant. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single line: "We need to meet." Now, no signature, no indication of who had sent it. Curiosity tingled alongside caution. I was no longer the frightened, hospitalized woman. I was strategic, precise, aware of the stakes. I arranged a discreet meeting at a private cafe downtown. When I arrived, two figures approached, Daniel and Vanessa, their expressions were unreadable, tentative, nervous, vulnerable. Claire, Daniel started, his voice low, controlled. We need to talk. I smiled faintly. Oh, I thought we had already spoken. Twice, once at the hospital, once at the dinner. Vanessa flinched, her eyes darting between us. She still hadn't recovered her composure from that night. I know, Daniel said, but I need closure. I need to understand why you didn't take me back, why you didn't. His voice faltered, why you humiliated us. I sipped my coffee calmly. The faint scent of roasted beans mingled with the sharp metallic tang of control. Humiliation. I asked softly, Daniel, Vanessa, you humiliated yourselves, not me. I simply allowed the truth to reveal itself. Vanessa's lips trembled. You could have forgiven us, she said, almost whispering. I shook my head, no. Forgiveness is not necessary for those who never truly cared, and mercy for those who abandoned me. That would be foolish. Daniel's hands clenched the edge of the table. His pride, the one that had driven so much of his life, was now shackled by fear. Claire, I never realized the extent of your inheritance, the fortune. I leaned forward slightly. You never realized because you never cared to look beyond yourself. And now, thanks to your own recklessness, you've lost the opportunity to be part of my life. Vanessa gasped, I'm done. I interrupted firmly, done explaining, done justifying, done entertaining attempts to manipulate or charm me. You both have seen the power of patience and precision. You've seen what happens when you leave someone in need. A silence fell between us, heavy, suffocating, final. Then a subtle but satisfying twist. I pulled out my phone and tapped a few keys. A private message, a carefully crafted post on social media, went live instantly. Abandoned. Underestimated, and yet unstoppable. #triumph, #new beginnings. Within minutes, notifications flooded. Likes, shares, comments. People started tagging Daniel and Vanessa, linking them publicly to the story of betrayal, loss, and greed. Vanessa's face went pale. Daniel's jaw clenched until it hurt. They realized too late that world had now judged them. They had no allies, no narrative control, no escape. And as I stood to leave, calm and composed, I felt it. A surge of pure liberation. My body was stronger, my mind sharper, my spirit unbreakable. For years, I had been invisible, ignored, belittled. But now I was unstoppable. I had not just survived betrayal, I had transformed it into absolute empowerment. They remained seated, helpless, a cautionary tale for anyone who dared to underestimate the strength of someone they abandoned. That night, I returned home. The city lights shimmered like tiny diamonds. And for the first time, I truly understood the words Aunt Margaret had written. Power, independence, and patience were gifts no one could steal. Gifts I now possessed in abundance. As I stood by the window, looking out at the skyline, I whispered to myself, I am free. I am whole. I am untouchable. And with that, my past, including Daniel, Vanessa, and every betrayal, was exactly where it belonged, behind me. The weeks that followed were strangely peaceful. Daniel and Vanessa had vanished from my immediate world, their presence reduced to whispers in the social circles we once shared. The ripple effect of their humiliation had spread further than I could have imagined. Invitations they once received no longer came. Business connections that had once fawned over them now looked at them with wariness, suspicion, and judgment. Their entire social image, carefully curated over years, was crumbling, but I didn't revel in it, I merely observed. Power, I had learned, was far more effective when exercised quietly. Public spectacle was satisfying, yes, but the true victory was internal. It was a quiet confidence, a sense of unshakable self-worth. I began to rebuild my life in earnest. The inheritance provided more than financial security. It offered the freedom to pursue passions, explore new avenues, and invest in my personal growth. I started a consultancy for women who had faced betrayal in their personal lives, teaching them not only financial independence but emotional resilience. My story, once a source of humiliation, became a beacon of hope for others. Every lecture, every seminar, every consultation was a reaffirmation. I had transformed trauma into triumph. My past was no longer a chain, it was a foundation, and yet, the past has a way of resurfacing when least expected. One morning, a private envelope arrived at my door. This time, it wasn't legal documents, a message from Daniel, or a letter from Aunt Margaret. This envelope contained only a key and a note in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting for the next chapter. Use wisely. Curiosity piqued, I examined the key. It was small, silver, and old-fashioned, almost antique. The note carried no signature, no instructions beyond those 2 brief lines. I felt a shiver of anticipation. Clearly someone, or something, was offering me another opportunity, another challenge, another test of the power and patience I had cultivated. I decided to follow the lead. The key fit into a small lockbox I found at the edge of my property, a box I had never noticed before, hidden in a small cabinet left untouched. Inside, I found documents, photographs, and letters, evidence of business fraud, embezzlement, and a trail of secrets that implicated a group of high-profile individuals. It was more than a gift. It was a tool, a weapon, a chance to ensure that injustice could not prevail. I realized in that moment that Aunt Margaret had been right. True wealth wasn't just money. It was influence, knowledge, the ability to take action with precision, patience, and wisdom. With this new information, I had the option to act decisively. I could confront corruption, hold people accountable, and use my resources to ensure fairness and justice. Extended beyond my personal sphere, I chose to do all three, but strategically. I reached out to legal advisors, journalists, and trusted allies. I created an anonymous network to investigate and expose wrongdoing. I didn't need public recognition. I didn't need applause. I needed results. Slowly, carefully, I ensured that those who had once thrived on dishonesty were brought to light. Their power diminished, their influence waned, their arrogance shattered. Throughout all of this, Daniel and Vanessa were shadows in the background. They attempted to reclaim a foothold in social and business circles, but the ripples of past mistakes, and my subtle, persistent influence, kept them from regaining traction. They were forced into obscurity, humbled by the consequences of their greed and carelessness. One day, months later, I attended a high-profile charity event. My organization had grown, my influence had expanded, and my reputation was solidified. People approached me with admiration and respect. The whispers of betrayal had faded, replaced by stories of resilience, strength, and triumph. And then, unexpectedly, Daniel appeared, alone, no Vanessa this time. His presence was tentative, almost fragile. He approached me cautiously, as though expecting punishment, as though the woman he once abandoned could be intimidated. "Claire," he said quietly, voice trembling, I need to apologize. Truly, I see now what I lost, what I let slip away." I studied him for a long moment, my face calm, composed. My heart, once aching with betrayal, was now a fortress of experience and knowledge. "Daniel," I said softly, "your words do not undo the past. Your absence, your abandonment, your greed, those things cannot be erased." He swallowed, and I continued, "But I hope you've learned. I hope you understand what it means to abandon someone who loves you. And I hope you take that lesson forward. For yourself, not for me." He nodded, defeated but reflective. There was no begging, no pleading, just recognition. He had been taught the ultimate lesson, the one I had learned months before, only through my own survival and empowerment. I walked away alone, strong, free, that night, standing on my balcony. I looked out at the city lights. $36 million in the bank, a network of allies, a growing organization, and most importantly, a life reclaimed from betrayal. I realized something profound. The real inheritance was never the money. It was the strength I had discovered, patience I had cultivated, and the wisdom to act decisively when the moment was right. And somewhere deep inside, a small smile formed. Aunt Margaret's words echoed in my mind. "Your life is just beginning, and the world is waiting for the woman you are destined to become." Yes, it was just the beginning. The months that followed were a testament to transformation. My life had become an intricate tapestry of independence, power, and purpose. I no longer measured my days by Daniel's whims or Vanessa's envy. Every morning, I woke with clarity, intent, and determination. I expanded my organization, offering financial guidance, emotional support, and mentorship to women who had faced betrayal, whether by spouses, partners, or business associates. I became a voice for those silenced by manipulation, a guide for those lost in despair. My story, once private and painful, was now a tool of empowerment for countless lives, and yet I allowed myself moments of reflection. I remembered the hospital room, the silence that had followed Daniel's callous words, and the scream of Vanessa when she had first glimpsed the truth. Pain had been my teacher, betrayal had been my guide, and my inheritance, the $36 million, was merely the means to enact the lessons life had carved into my heart. I had also learned another invaluable truth. Justice did not always require confrontation. Sometimes true justice unfolded quietly, invisibly, in ways that left no question of victory. Daniel and Vanessa were a living testament. The collapse of their financial ventures, the erosion of their social status, the humiliation that followed them like a shadow, all without a single word from me directly. Yet life, as Aunt Margaret had hinted, was full of surprises. One crisp autumn morning, a letter arrived, an invitation. A charity gala, yes, but this time it was different. It was a recognition of my work, my mentorship program, my financial guidance network, my efforts to empower women. I attended naturally, prepared to receive acknowledgement. Not applause, not revenge, but quiet recognition of the path I had carved from betrayal into triumph. The room was filled with influential figures, philanthropists, and individuals whose lives I had touched through my work. Cameras clicked, but I was no longer a woman defined by scandal. I was defined by strength, resilience, and vision. And then, unexpectedly, Daniel appeared, alone, again. This time there was no bravado, no smirk, no arrogance, only genuine remorse. He approached, head bowed slightly, hands folded in respect. "Claire," he said quietly, voice steady, "I wanted to acknowledge what you've done, the work you're doing, the life you've built. I see it now. And I am truly sorry for everything." I studied him carefully. Years of betrayal, pain, and disappointment flashed through my mind. But I was no longer the woman who had depended on his approval or validation. I was free, untouchable, and grounded in purpose. "Daniel," I said slowly, "acknowledgement doesn't erase the past. Your absence, your choices, your abandonment. They've shaped the person I am today, and that person doesn't need your approval or forgiveness. She's her own authority." He nodded, understanding. There was no pleading, no justification, only acceptance of the consequences he had earned. I turned back to the room, to the faces of those I had helped, to the work that mattered. I smiled, not with triumph over others, but with serenity, with the knowledge that I had reclaimed my life fully. Months turned into a year. My financial network grew, my organization expanded internationally, and my influence solidified. Daniel and Vanessa faded into obscurity, their attempts to regain footing thwarted by their past decisions and my careful orchestration of consequences. I visited my aunt's grave one evening, the sun setting in hues of gold and crimson. I whispered softly, "Thank you, Aunt Margaret, for believing in me, for leaving me a legacy far beyond money, for teaching me patience, precision, and power." And in that moment I understood fully, the inheritance had been more than wealth. It had been a catalyst, a key to unlocking strength, resilience, and purpose. Life had tested me, broken me, and abandoned me, but in the end it had given me everything I truly needed: freedom, independence, justice, and a future crafted by my own hands, unshaken by those who had once tried to diminish me. I walked away from the cemetery with a lightness I had never known, carrying the knowledge that I was not defined by betrayal, but by how I had risen above it. And as the evening air embraced me, I whispered a final affirmation: "I am free, I am whole, I am unstoppable." The months following the gala and the financial collapse of Daniel and Vanessa were oddly serene. I had expected relief, perhaps even vindictive satisfaction, but what I felt instead was clarity. Power, I realized, wasn't about watching someone suffer. True power was calm, deliberate, and unshakable. Daniel and Vanessa became lessons in human frailty. Word of their failures spread quietly but thoroughly. Daniel's career in finance stalled. His attempts to secure new clients met skepticism. People whispered about his reckless investments, his overconfidence, and his poor judgment. Vanessa, once charming and ambitious, found doors closing wherever she turned. Their social circles slowly shrank, invitations stopped coming. The whispers followed them wherever they went, a constant reminder that they had misjudged not only me, but life itself. I could have gloated, I suppose. I could have publicized every detail, let the world see their fall in stark relief. But revenge, I had learned, tastes sweeter when measured, patient, and indirect. I simply continued to live my life, quietly building, quietly succeeding, quietly proving that my worth was never defined by anyone else. And yet, reflection was unavoidable. I spent time thinking about the choices I had made, the mistakes I had endured, and the resilience I had cultivated. There was a strange beauty in the path I had traveled, from betrayal and abandonment to triumph and independence. Every misstep, every cruel word, every selfish act against me had carved a lesson I would carry forever. I visited Daniel and Vanessa once more, not to confront, not to gloat, but to witness. They were alone, together but fragile, seated in a modest apartment far removed from their former extravagance. The woman I had once known as Vanessa no longer radiated confidence. She was cautious, wary, ashamed. Daniel's face carried the weight of recognition, the bitter realization that he had gambled with my life and lost. I did not speak. I merely observed, allowing them to feel the consequences of their Choices, sometimes the most profound lessons, are learned in silence without words, and I had already taught them everything they needed to know. Meanwhile, I continued to expand my influence, my wealth, and my organization. Every action I took was precise, strategic, and mindful. I helped women gain financial independence, secure careers, and rebuild lives shattered by betrayal. I invested in properties, businesses, and charitable ventures, not for recognition, but for lasting impact. Through it all, I never forgot the hospital room. I never forgot Daniel's cruelty, Vanessa's shrieks, or the helplessness I had once felt, but I also did not dwell on bitterness. I had learned that anger is fleeting, while patience, precision, and intelligence create permanent results. And so I thrived. I became a woman defined not by the men who had tried to diminish her, but by the life she had built herself. I had power, freedom, and clarity, the ultimate inheritance. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting golden light across the city, when I finally allowed myself to pause and reflect. For years, I had been defined by other people's expectations, their cruelty, their betrayal. Daniel and Vanessa had once seemed insurmountable, their manipulation a prison I could not escape. But now, standing in my penthouse overlooking the city, I realized the truth. No one could ever control me again. The inheritance had been the catalyst, yes. $36 million had opened doors, provided freedom, and created opportunities. But the real wealth, the true inheritance, was something no money could buy: resilience, self-respect, independence, and clarity of purpose. Daniel and Vanessa had disappeared from my life, but their lessons lingered. I had learned to protect myself, to assert boundaries, to recognize manipulation, and to act with precision when necessary. I had discovered that power was not about revenge alone. It was about creating a life so full and intentional that those who had sought to hurt you became irrelevant. I thought back to the hospital room, the fear, the betrayal, the disbelief. I remembered the moment I first read Aunt Margaret's letter, her words echoing in my mind, "Your life is just beginning, and the world is waiting for the woman you are destined to become." I understood now that those words were more than encouragement, they were prophecy. Every act of kindness I extended, every strategic decision I made, every mentorship, every investment. It was the fulfillment of that vision. I had transformed betrayal into triumph, cruelty into opportunity, abandonment into clarity. I had faced the darkest moment of life and emerged not only intact, but empowered, enlightened, and unbreakable. And yet, in that empowerment, I found peace. Not the restless, fleeting peace of avoidance, but the steady, enduring peace of knowing I was in full control of my destiny. Daniel's regret and Vanessa's panic were irrelevant now. They had been important only as a catalyst, as a mirror reflecting my strength back to me. I allowed myself a smile, a quiet acknowledgement of all I had endured and accomplished. I had navigated loss, injustice, and betrayal with patience and precision, crafting a life far beyond what I had once imagined, and in doing so, I had become unstoppable. From that day forward, my focus shifted from past wounds to future possibilities. I expanded my network, investing in projects that empowered women, funded education, and created sustainable opportunities for those who had been overlooked or underestimated. My influence grew, not through intimidation or dominance, but through strategy, empathy, and clarity. Daniel and Vanessa were a faint memory, a cautionary tale in the story of my life. Their misdeeds had no power over me now. I had ensured it legally, financially, and emotionally. The lessons they had forced me to learn were now my armor, my wisdom, and my strength. Standing on the balcony one evening, looking at the city lights twinkling like a sea of stars, I whispered softly, "I am free. I am whole. I am unstoppable." And I meant it. The inheritance had given me wealth, yes, but it had also given me clarity, independence, and purpose. It had shown me that true power comes from patience, precision, and self-belief. And it had proven that no betrayal, no abandonment, no cruelty could ever define me again. I turned from the balcony and looked at my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back was stronger, wiser, and radiant, not because of money, but because of everything I had endured and overcome. For the first time, I realized I had everything I had ever wanted, not just financial freedom, but the freedom to live life on my terms, the courage to pursue dreams without hesitation, the strength to protect myself and others, and the knowledge that my past no longer dictated my future. It had merely prepared me to thrive, and so, with the city sprawling beneath me, stars beginning to shimmer above, I embraced my life fully. I had survived betrayal, abandonment, and loss. I had transformed adversity into triumph. I had claimed my power, my inheritance, and my destiny. And in that moment, I knew beyond all doubt, I was unstoppable. The story of abandonment, betrayal, and greed had ended, not with revenge alone, but with empowerment, resilience, and triumph. And from that day forward, my life was mine to shape, guided by wisdom, strength, and the unwavering knowledge of my own worth.